Hello, welcome to the Christian Idealism channel. My name is Kyle Allender, and today I will be presenting just basic definitions of theism, naturalism, and axiarchism. So, let's first define why am I doing this video, Kyle? Why are you defining these terms? Well, the reason why is because I see these terms thrown around a lot in the philosophy of religion community. Um, I see definitions of naturalism that I disagree with. I see definitions of theism that I disagree with, and even definitions of axiarchism, which I also disagree with. Although axiarchism is not a popular view, most of the views are typically the two most popular views is going to be theism versus naturalism. There is a third option, which is axiarchism, which I will explain in this video. But in this video, I'm just going to focus on definitions of how I would define these terms when we're using these terms. If you saw my update video, I went over how my view of theism pretty much makes talk of ontology irrelevant. And there's a reason for that, which I hope to present with you today. So I'm going to define the three terms. And when I'm done defining those three terms, I'm going to then explain each one in detail. So, of course, the first definition is theism. So, my definition of theism is this: that there is a fundamental omnipotence power who governs creation and change on the basis of normative goodness. That's theism. Naturalism. My definition of naturalism is this: there are only non normative, non intentional substances and laws governing change. And then finally, the third option, axiarchism. My definition of this view is that there is a fundamental normative but non-intentional principle governing creation and change. Now, I want to break these definitions up. So, what about my definition of theism? Why do I, where do I include why that definition? Well, notice that my definition does not include anything about God being natural or supernatural or physical or non-physical or any other categories you come up with. Doesn't matter what category you come up with. What matters is that God is fundamentally just omnipotence. God is a power. He doesn't have power like, I have the power to move my arms, or, you know, my car has the power, the engine has the power to move my car, right? That's so typically when we talk about power, we're referring to something that someone has, right? So a Superman, for example, has power, right? But Superman is not actually power in the basic sense, right? It's different for God. For God, God is power. So he's not a being that has power, but rather he is just power. Okay. Now, of course, my preferred view of this is that God is what's called an omnipotence trope. I don't want to get into trope theory in this video, but because and the reason why I have this definition is because might be some theists that don't think that God is a trope, which is fine. But I think all theists can agree that God is power, basically. That God is not a being among beings, but he is being itself, or he is power itself. So God's omnipotence is not something he has, but rather he is that very thing. He is power, right? So that's why I had that definition. And of course, the second part of my definition would be that God, who is power, acts upon the basis of normative goodness. So, as a theist, as a classical theist myself, I would say that God is power, but he is also goodness, and that he acts towards goodness. Now, again, notice how I make no reference about God being supernatural. I make no reference about God being natural. I make no reference about God being physical. I make no reference about God being non physical. I make no reference about God being a mind or not a mind, or any of these other categories that people come up with. So, again, when I define theism, I'm being as broad as I can, trying to encompass as many views of ontology as I can so that it makes more sense. Now, onto my definition of naturalism and breaking that down. So, the definition of naturalism is that there are only non normative, non intentional substances and laws governing change. Now, we have to first define what is something non normative. Well, my definition of something that's non normative is basically anything that is indifferent towards goodness or indifferent toward any sort of axiological goal, right? And so typically, this definition includes what's called the hypothesis of indifference, where nature, or you can even include like a sort of polytheistic view of this, or any sort of view of this, where basically that fundamental reality is indifferent towards value, right? Is indifferent towards any kind of goal. And then, of course, the second part of the definition is what's called non-intentional substances, which means a non-intentional substance is something that's not goal-oriented, but rather it just brutally acts towards some end. I don't know what that end could be, right? Or maybe it doesn't act towards any end at all, right? So when we're talking about indifference, it could be completely random. There could be just random chaos. There doesn't have to be laws of nature. Yes, there might be laws of nature, but these laws of nature, whatever they are non-intentional and they're non-normative. They're kind of like, just things that happen, right? That's my definition of naturalism in a nutshell. And then axiarchism, it's a little more complicated, but as I've stated before, in case you forgot, axiarchism states that there is a fundamentally normative but non-intentional principle governing creation and change. Now, axiarchism is a little bit different because axiarchism does not claim to be indifferent towards good things. In fact, axiarchism would say that things do act towards goodness, that nature itself is acting towards some kind of axiological end, right? It's normative in the sense that it acts towards goodness. So, one of the views you might say, axiarchism might say something like, things exist because it's good for them to exist, or something like that, right? That's just one example of axiarchism. There are some, extreme forms of axiarchism out there. Like, some people just think, oh, well, the reason why humans exist is because it's good for us to exist, or the reasons why, you know, for example, Philip Goff might be, I think he would consider himself an axiarchist because the cosmos acts towards some kind of axiological or valuable end, right? So it's not theism because there's no being involved in the process, but rather nature, it's sort of like a middle ground. So it grants that nature acts towards goodness, but that ultimately nature is what's called it's non-intentional, meaning it's not really deliberate in its actions. So like nature doesn't act towards one thing. It's not like choosing one thing over another, but rather it just kind of brutally acts towards some good end. That's the axiarchist position. So those are my definitions of theism, naturalism, and axiarchism. If you guys disagree with my definitions, feel free to post your disagreements in the comments. But those are the definitions that I work with because those are the definitions that I think encompass the total logically possible state of different views when it comes to the philosophy of religion. So that'll be it for my video. Have a nice day.